It is as simple as creating something that no one else has ever seen before.
Hey yo, welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast, presented by Hippo Direct. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, digital marketing dude at Hippo Direct, and you can reach me at max@hippodirect.com for help using your podcast as a marketing tool. This is episode number 8088, and today's guest is Nick Uhas. He started his career as a pre-med student and then went down a pretty different path than your average pre-med student. He started making these fascinating and super creative science experiments, started posting them on social media, and now has amassed over 500,000 YouTube subscribers and over 7 million TikTok followers. His videos consistently get millions of views, and he's made stops on Big Brother, America's Got Talent, Dr. Oz, and The Today Show along the way. You'll hear how he turned himself and his content into a sensation, and the science behind everything from creativity to garlic breath. That's Nick in a nutshell, but as he says, let's go bigger. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with my fellow native Ohioan, Nickipedia, Nick Uhas. Nick, how you doing today?
I'm doing good as anyone can be doing mid-quarantine.
Yes, 'tis the season, right? Thank you so much. I know you got so much going on. Obviously, it's a crazy time at the time we're recording this, but thank you for making the time today. We are going to get into a ton of what you've done and turn your career into with the coolest science experiments and other stuff, even gold mining that you'll ever see. And this has led you to be featured on everywhere from America's Got Talent to Dr. Oz to the Today Show. So naturally, we're going to start off by talking about rollerblading.
Yeah, it's a great place to start. Actually, honestly, it is a great place to start.
Yeah, it's really smooth, stale fish or whatever tricks I don't know what tricks you can do with rollerblading, but
Oh, go ahead. But there is a thing called a fish brain, just so you know.
A fish brain. Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to dive into that. But rollerblading, so somehow at a certain point when you were starting off your career, you became a stunt rollerblader. So where the heck did this come from?
Yeah, and I'm going to take it just one step back further than that, right? Because it will make sense, and this will all factor in. If we take one chapter back, right, like the prelogue, if you will, it would actually be wrestling. So I was a wrestler before I got involved in anything with this X Games pro rollerblading stuff, and it was really in wrestling. Wrestling is by far the hardest sport. I don't care what anybody says. They can argue it. They can say no, like football, baseball, skill, blah, blah, blah. There is no other sport that is literally just you and your competitor out competing mano-a-mano together, and then whoever loses gets embarrassed in front of a crowd, and whoever wins gets to be spared the embarrassment. I mean, it is as close to like Gladiator as possible. And so I have two brothers. I'm the youngest of three. And when I was in grade school, they got into wrestling and they basically just started beating me up. And I thought, man, I cannot have this. This is garbage. I don't want to be the one who just gets, the floor mopped with. And so I decided to start wrestling as well when I was in the 6th grade. And that gave me just a little leg up, just a little tiny leg up for all of the wrestlers that would be in 7th grade when I joined the middle school team. And because I had like a little bit of knowledge of wrestling, I got put on a team as a 7th grader. So it was like a leap ahead. And so my 7th grade year, I just got destroyed. I mean, like everybody that I wrestled, I just got wrecked because most 7th graders aren't on a team. But by the time that I got to 8th grade, I had spent a whole year competing with these kids who were better than me. So my 8th grade year, I was like close to undefeated because I was wrestling kids who were my age and then a little bit younger. The same thing happened freshman year. I came in with a little bit of experience and I got put on varsity as a freshman, and I was wrestling kids with 4 years more experience than I. And it was brutal, dude. I just got wrecked. I had a losing record I don't even know if I even like finished actually the 6 minutes. I literally just I think I just got tech fault or pinned. It just was
You're really
terrible.
good at getting beat up, is what you're saying.
Yes. And so we would have sort of like breakout sessions, and they would take kids from the varsity team and they'd have goal setting workshops. And we would sit down and we would write out our goals. And pretty much like everyone who's in wrestling has the same goal. And that goal is you want to be a state placer or make it to the state tournament. People will say things like, I want to be a state champion, but that's like saying like, I want to be a Super Bowl champion. It's like, that's really hard to do.
Not the easiest.
No. And so we wrote out our goals. I want to be a state placer. I want to go to the state tournament. And, here's the years that I want to do it. And I set it out and I posted that piece of paper in front of me at my work bench back at my house. And so I looked at it every single day. And what compounded the effort basically to do this was just literally getting so wrecked as a freshman. The embarrassment level was so high. And so I remember literally crying underneath the bleachers and promising myself that I would, within my power, I would never, ever be this bad at wrestling ever again. And so I went the extra mile. I, started doing the after school programs. I was in the gym. I ran throughout the summer, meaning like I participated in like the cross country training courses in order to really be like the best wrestler possible coming in. So in my sophomore year, literally within 1 year, I became a state alternate, meaning like I went from like a nobody, like zip zero zilch, to being one win away from going to the state tournament, which is basically saying like one win away from going to the Super Bowl. It's like,
yeah.
And that is a leap. And that leap, so much gratification came from that, and so much proof of this system of goal setting and doggedly working at your goals specifically that are fine-tuned and kind of blocking everything else out was proof to me that like, oh my gosh, this works. So I applied the same concept my junior year, and then I actually went to the state tournament. I must have gone 2-2 or 1-2. And then my senior year, I placed 4th in the state. And like when I was on the podium, I remember thinking to myself, my God, in 4 short years, I went from being literally as like a totally losing record to being where like everybody wants to be, which is placing at states. And it confirmed this belief in my my soul. Even that sounds so dramatic, but it was like really honestly like the core of my personality had really written the script that you can literally do anything in life as long as you write it out, you stay focused on it, and you don't deviate from that course. And so again, like I said, this does factor into the whole rollerblading thing. So so we speed up a little bit. When I was a teenager, I was born in the 80s. So
Wait, you were born as a teenager?
I was born as a teenager.
That's impressive. That's impressive in itself.
It was crazy. I came out of the womb arguing with my parents, wanting the car immediately. But I was born in the 80s, so I was a teenager in the 90s. And in the 90s, there was this big craze of rollerblading, and like this, like specifically this like stunt rollerblading where you had like a wallet chain and long hair and these like pipe jeans.
Oh yeah, like those were the days.
Yeah, you probably remember. You probably owned a pair of Jinko jeans yourself.
I went through a major extreme sports phase with, was obsessed with the X Games, and in Cleveland, as you know, we had the Gravity Games for a few years as well. So many fond memories in the extreme sports and rollerblading world.
Yes. So you clearly remember this whole fad.
Yeah.
So when I was a teenager, that was like what all the cool kids were doing, or like, the fringe misfits. And like, that seemed very attractive as a teenager who wants to rebel. And so I like became kind of obsessed with skating culture and the whole thing. And like, while a lot of my friends, they did it for a little bit, maybe a year or two, and then they kind of like dropped out or whatever, graduated on and went to other things, I kind of became obsessed with it. And I started to apply this mindset for this wrestling stuff that I did to rollerblading. And so upon graduating high school, of which, little random fun fact, I took a trip with my dad for 79 days around the world and went to 17 different countries in between my high school graduation and my first day of college. So it was kind of a little bit of a crash course and for like life. And so by the time I got back, I felt like I had this like amazing mindset from wrestling. I had this real world experience for how the world works and how to socialize and how to be out in the real world. And I kind of told myself, even though I was going to Miami of Ohio as a freshman, biology major, I had told myself that my goal was that I wanted to be a professional stunt rollerblader. I'd always wanted to do it. Thought there was probably no better time in my life. You know, the older you get, the more responsibilities you have. And so I kind of like came up with this pseudo plan that by the time that I reached like my semester break for like Christmas, I had proposed this plan to my parents, which was my parents had like said, "Hey, listen, we will subsidize your college career by providing for you X amount of dollars for your tuition, through years 1 through 3 or 1 through 4 as an in-state resident, whatever that is, whatever that looks like." And so I was like, "Oh, that's a pretty good amount of money." And so I decided to take that and then dice it up and then redeliver it sort of under the guise of why would it be such a good idea for me to move to California instead of stay in Ohio. But really, the reason I was doing this was so that I could pursue professional stunt rollerblading out in San Diego.
Of course. Well, everybody goes through that exact thought process and career plan.
Yeah, as a freshman in college, I'm like, you know what? This just isn't for me. I'm going to be a pro rollerblader. So I was going to move to California because the UC school system was better in pre-med. It was ranked better in pre-med than Miami of Ohio at the time. So I said, like, I'm going to move to California. I'm going to become a California resident. I'm going to transfer to UCSD, and that's going to make me a better student overall, and I'll have a better chance of getting into medical school. And I said, all you have to do is basically like reallocate the same funds you were going to give me anyways as an in-state student. And I'm going to basically go to a 2-year school and apply the rest of those funds to me living out in California. And then once I become a resident, then I'll be able to go to UCSD for the same price as what I was going to go to Miami of Ohio for. And so I mean, it was a crazy plan. I mean, it literally sounded ridiculous because it is ridiculous. I also kind of factored in that I would somehow make money through skating, sort of. I don't know. That was sort of like a fuzzy portion since there's not a lot of
the
money.
skating money always comes.
Yeah, exactly. And so my parents said, okay, we've saved this capital for you to do this. If this is what you think is the right choice for you, like, we're going to miss you, but take your 94 4-door Accord with rust spots and we'll see you out there. We'll come visit. And so I moved out to California, I believe in May 2004. And my underlining goal, truthfully though, was to allocate all that extra time and all that effort to becoming a professional stunt rollerblader, because the industry is actually in San Diego. It's not Los Angeles, even though it is sort of this like extension reach of the entertainment industry. And so I moved out with my two friends at the time, my buddy Nate and my buddy Vince. And when we got out there, it was everything but flawless. I mean, it was pretty much a train wreck to begin with. In the first like 3 months, both guys had already established that they no longer wanted to live in California. It pretty much crumbled pretty quickly, but I was so steadfast and I really wanted to become a professional rollerblader. I had moved out with those guys, and then I moved to live in an area that was like a little probably closer in age range to where I wanted to be, which was there was a school around that area called SDSU. And so I got like a room in a house of 9 people living at SDSU.
Oh yeah, the Aztecs, right?
Yeah. And one of the things that I learned was that essentially, like, not knowing what it would mean to be a pro, how you get yourself out there, what you do, how do you network, how do you pitch yourself, how do you sell yourself in this very social industry. And in many ways, like, what I learned is that even though I was competing in competitions, I was rubbing elbows with the other pros, I was going to the skate parks and being friendly and doing everything that one should do in order to be pro. Any type of industry where you're being filmed or videographed, or it's a social industry, really you turn pro or you make the money or you become a center focus person within the industry by selling yourself and by being liked and being in the industry and being present. And it was kind of a little bit of an awakening to realize that like your skill level is only perhaps just like a little bit of what really matters, and that a lot of other things actually matter a lot more when it comes to being a professional.
Yeah.
And while I was out there, I got what's called like a regional sponsorship. So it's like your local skate park or whatever. Those guys then turned me on to skating in bigger competitions. And very much, again, like the wrestling thing, which is why I brought it up to begin with, is that I very much lost faith at a certain point in time, kind of convinced that I was going to go back to Ohio like how a lot of people do. They sort of retreat back home to the Midwest with their tail between their legs. And it was actually like in a December, January type lull that I remember thinking, man, like, it was worth the run. I learned a lot. I did a lot. I really kind of gave it my all, but I'm pretty much gonna pack it up and go home. Which is interesting because at that time frame, I was actually winning a lot of competitions. I was winning competitions. I was getting sections in videos. I was really rising up in the industry, but I felt like I wasn't rising up fast enough, which is a good lesson in business overall, which is basically like a lot of the fruits of your labor aren't really seen until further down the road. So you may be like winning in the time being, but you may not be actually seeing
Right.
the results
Until way
longer. And so I had literally like decided to pack up shop, and my sponsor said, "Hey, listen, we got you into regional qualifier for the ASA, the Aggressive Skating Association." Which I was like, "Oh my gosh, guys, like I'm not qualified. Like I'm not qualified to be here because I didn't even qualify at the local level." And they said, "Dude, no worries. Like you're really good. You're gonna be fine. Wear our shirt." I was so nervous. I was so like petrified nervous to compete in this competition because like some of the big name pros were gonna be there. They were just all like really big guys, and like you don't want to sort of put yourself out there and kind of get wrecked, especially if you're not really supposed to be there. It just looks really bad. And so after the first round, I was in the top 7, and the top 10 turned pro. And so I
Holy
like
shit.
couldn't believe it. I was so floored. I was actually like within range of turning pro, like this like lifelong childhood dream. Like I'd wanted to be pro since I was 10, and here I am 19 years old, and I was like so close to like achieving this thing. And so when they finally tallied it all up, I ended up 7th. And so that actually qualified me to become a pro for ASA.
So you achieved your goal, that like you achieved the dream at that point in your life. You got to that point.
I like got to that point, and it was like a shock to the system because it was almost like the wrestling stuff felt like it was like I had a coaching staff, and I had people there that were there to support me, and I had all these things, and like this was the first thing that I had done really as like an entrepreneur. Like no one I was gonna say no one told me to do it. Everyone told me not to do it. Everyone
I'm sure.
was like, "What are you thinking? Don't do this." Like I broke my ankle, I broke my wrist, I broke my tailbone actually the first day that I moved out to
Oh
San
my
Diego,
God.
which was terrible thing. The pain was awful.
If you were listening to this and had no idea kind of who Nickipedia is, or who Nick Uhas is, you would think you're kind of like a multi-decade career professional stunt rollerblader. But it's now you're known for so many things in addition to that. So it's pretty crazy.
What really sort of like teed me up for actually getting into all of this science stuff was the fact that I had learned how to become a professional in an entertainment based industry. So while everyone thinks rollerblading is like a sport, it's really how it looks. It's like when you're flipping through a magazine, you're looking at like how does the picture look, and when you're looking at video footage, it's how do you perform the tricks. So it's actually much more of an entertainment based industry than it
Yeah.
is a sport based industry. And so kind of unbeknownst to myself, I had learned how to become a professional entertainer. And so like with that little notch on my belt, I had realized that I got to a point, which is hilarious. Like I pitched my parents on going to UCSD. At the time that I was out there, they had actually changed the requirements for who is a resident and who is not. I now did not qualify to become a resident, even though I had been out there for 2 years and I had a job and I had changed my address and I had a driver's license and all the things. I was technically not a resident because my parents' tax returns were not also California based. So
Hmm.
I basically did what everyone would do in that scenario, and I went to Ohio State and I became a Buckeye.
There you
And
go.
so,
It's just like my brother.
yeah. And so this is a feeder school that like I would accept all my credits across all, Miami, San Diego Mesa College. At one point in time, I actually had gone to Yale University. They were willing to take all my credits. I was a Buckeye by birth. Every single person in my family graduated from Ohio State. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go to Ohio State. I'm going to graduate. And then I'm going to kind of like get right back into it. And I was thinking at the time skating, and I'm going to come back to California at some point in time. And so my major was biology. And so in my first year, when I started taking organic chemistry, I realized that I had bit off something that I just probably could not chew. And that was taking organic chemistry and being a professional rollerblader in Ohio at the same time. And so I called up my team manager and I said, I'm going to have to take like a break until I'm done with organic chemistry because like this is going to affect my trajectory as a pre-med student. I'm going to have to focus on this. And he said, no sweat, dude. The line's open. Whenever you want to come back in, you can come back in. And so I started focusing on my studies as a pre-med student. And I took it so seriously, just like everything else that I had done up to this point. And I ended up graduating in Ohio State with a 3.92. So like I was like pre-med guy. And in this time
Pre-med
frame,
guy. Well, congrats on that. That's a hell of a GPA, especially in that field.
and so when I ended up graduating, I thought about, okay, I could go to medical school, which was like sort of the plan all along, or maybe perhaps I could explore some other categories. In my super senior year, I took summer school at Yale University. And while I was there, I took economics and a video production course. And my TA
Ah.
at Yale was a guy named Kurt Hugo Schneider, who has this huge YouTube channel. And at the time, he was just starting YouTube. And he had one of like the first viral videos where it was this like Michael Jackson compilation, and he produced the music, and it went like crazy viral. He was on Ellen, he was on Oprah, he was on all these late night shows. And I thought to myself, man, I don't know what this YouTube stuff is, but this looks awesome. Like this looks way cooler than being a doctor. And like I kind of had already at the time been thinking like, man, maybe like, maybe I just like science. Maybe I don't really want to be a physician. Maybe I really want to be an entertainer instead. Maybe I really want to go into entertainment.
When you had that realization and ultimately, obviously, like if you look at your career now, you obviously decided to go down that path, and a quick search on YouTube or TikTok will give you plenty of results and plenty of videos and experiments in your feed. What were your parents and kind of everybody in your inner circle? What was their reaction to you going down the quote unquote entertainment or YouTube route as opposed to finding a med school and residency?
It was brutal. So,
Oh, wasn't it? They weren't like, oh, sure, sweetie, go.
yeah, no, it wasn't like, oh, okay, yeah, hey, look, you've done all these other things. You could probably do this too. No, like that's what I wanted to happen. That did not happen. The true story actually is I was in a fraternity. I was in Delta Tau Delta. But my friend, who was actually another rollerblader at the time, who lived in Cleveland, and that's how we became friends, his name was Dave. Dave was in another fraternity called Phi Psi, and Phi Psi had this thing called the Business Builder Leadership Academy, and it was down in Cabo San Lucas. And I, at the time at Ohio State, was like really, really, really searching, actually wanting to like have some type of career direction. And so this career type like leadership academy that happened down in Cabo San Lucas seemed like that was going to be the answer to all of my problems, which was like they would sort of incubate your wants and desires, and they would pair you up with other professionals to say, hey, maybe this is good for you, maybe this isn't. And it would give you a real world taste of what careers could be like based off of people who actually worked in that industry. And so I had applied to it and I got denied. And so I applied again and I got denied, but I'd already made up my mind to go. So I actually snuck in with a fake identity. and I,
Of
I,
course. I mean, who doesn't do that?
who doesn't do that? Who doesn't sneak into a leadership academy in a foreign country? And so I took a guy's name tag who didn't show up for the week, and I became this guy named Patrick McCardle. And I ultimately ended up taking the course, and it really changed my whole outlook on careers, career projections, the whole shebang. And when I came back actually from spring break, I remember so excited. I had this epiphany. And I remember telling my dad, we're sitting at Starbucks, and I said, Dad, I said, I'm not going to become a doctor. I'm going to become an entrepreneur. And my dad like freaked out. I mean, I might as well have told him like, I'm actually Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, it was.
Yeah. Well, that conversation comes next, right?
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, I'm actually the serial killer. It was
Oh.
so like I
Spoiler alert.
was yeah, I was shocked, man. I really was. Like I was shocked by the reaction, because I really thought that they would be like as energetic and as excited as I was, because to be truthful, like I kind of felt like I got on the pre-med wagon and I never got off, but I never really considered why, or do I even want to be a doctor? It's a very common problem. You see this all the time in college.
Right.
People get on these trajectories from freshman year. Their parents maybe confirm it because their parents are a doctor, lawyer, vet, engineer, whatever it is, fill in the blank. And then they go down this road. And then by the time that they're like junior, senior, they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that this whole time I never wanted to do this, because they were never exposed.
Right. Yeah. We've had a couple previous guests who both are lawyers and spent some times, practicing attorneys in kind of big law at big corporate law firms. And then both of them in a matter of time realized, I want to do something very different than this. and the same sort of thing I'm sure happens a lot in med school as well in your experience. But sometimes it takes getting there and actually experiencing yourself to actually realize like, holy shit, I want to do this, not that. So you're definitely an example of that as well. I want to dive into some of your YouTube prowess and actually, and we can talk some TikTok as well, because believe it or not, I discovered you on TikTok, and I'm not even a big TikTok user myself, but you've completely blown up on TikTok, obviously, over the past, year, almost a year at the time of this recording.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
YouTube, this is kind of like a fast forward of the entrepreneurial entertainer route that you had been thinking about after you had that epiphany. And so, what is it that you enjoy the most about doing these science experiments and fascinating videos that you create?
Like, just to give you like a super like hopscotch forward, to answer your question here.
I like
Uh,
that.
like basically post graduating, I decided that entertainment was a thing, but I didn't know what direction to go. But I had this science-based knowledge from all this work that I had done in the pre-med field. I actually had originally moved to New York City to become like an actor because I didn't know. I eventually found myself in hosting very quickly. I thought hosting was a much better fit because I could just be me.
Hosts are awesome, whether they're TV, podcast, yeah, any host, name it.
Absolutely. And so I did like red carpet interviews, and I excelled in hosting. And so I got my first agent while doing that in New York. And then I wanted to make a splash. I went on Big Brother. I gained a little bit of a social media following. I
Oh
wanted
yeah.
to I wanted to keep moving forward. So I did a Kickstarter and started a YouTube channel that was science-based entertainment, because I figured that this would be the best thing for me to do, because I have the science understanding and the knowledge, and now I understand how to be in front of the camera and how to produce content. So then I moved to LA and I pursued that doggedly. And in the time I was trying to build my audience, and I went on America's Got Talent. I went on the Today Show. I did all these guest stars for other larger YouTube channels like Smosh, the Smosh Squad. Eventually I ended up working with people like David Dobrik. And then in this sort of time frame, 6 years down the road of being in LA, of which again, working in entertainment the whole way through, hosted a Netflix show. We just shot second season of the Netflix show called Blown Away.
Yeah, yeah.
um, and
Really
doing,
cool.
yeah, and doing TV stuff too. This thing came around called TikTok. And at the time, everyone was like, isn't that what you do like dances on? Isn't that for dancing, dancing, dancing?
Right.
And the whole time through, I always remember thinking to myself, because you go to VidCon, you go to Playlist Live, you go to all these conferences, and everyone says the same thing when they're up on stage, and someone raises their hand, they go, "Hey, what would you say the best advice is to be a YouTuber?" And usually someone like Hank Green will answer, and they'll say, "Go back to 2003." And I'm always like, ugh, like that is the worst answer. because you feel like you're helpless. Like you can't do that. You don't have a time machine. You don't have a flux capacitor. Like,
Right.
what are you supposed to do? Like,
Well, I thought
like
you might have one, but maybe that's a separate story.
it's the next video. But then you want to extrapolate. What are they really saying? What they're saying is that early adopters really win in the social media space. And so I remember thinking, like, anytime I could ever get a chance to be an early adopter on any other platform, I'm going to take it and I'm going to run with it. And so there were some other apps along the way that I actually spent a lot of time trying to develop. Me not developing the apps, but me trying to develop my presence on those
Right.
apps. And those apps literally died. Like you've probably never even heard of them because they just died out. Like they were video-based apps that were similar to Instagram that just totally died. And so when Musical.ly was around, Musical.ly did not make any sense for me. I was not doing dances. I was not doing lip syncing. That was not my shtick. When TikTok came around, TikTok had been around for about a year. And my niece at the time was like, hey, you should do this thing. And I was like, yeah, I don't do dance. She goes, no, it's everything. And then I was also at the same time working with David Dobrik and the Vlog Squad. And Jason Nash was like, hey, you would kill it on TikTok. And they had a guest at the time who was some wild animal park guy. And he was like, dude, yeah, you really would. And so I was like,
You always got to trust the wild animal park guy when you hear advice from him.
It was not the Tiger King. However, you just got to go with it. And so I was like, all right, hey, look, it's worth investing my time, energy, and effort into. And so I started really, really like reshooting and recapturing and redoing all of our successful YouTube videos. And in the world of social media in this space, your currency is your time. I mean, really, like your time is how you sort of divvy up your capital. And so I spent a lot of time recreating science experiments and putting them on TikTok, reshot on my iPhone, formatted for vertical video. And in a very short amount of time, we got someone over at TikTok to be like, hey, we really want, there to be more science stuff. Here's sort of our best practices. We started following those best practices. And then we started figuring out, how do you get a video to 1 million views? Okay. How do you get people to follow you? Okay. And we went from like 1 to 3 to 5 to 7 million pretty fast. We started the TikTok channel in June and we're now at 7.2 million. So like,
holy shit,
we went fast.
Congrats. Yeah. Well, congrats on that. And it's crazy. It's really mind blowing when you think about like YouTube you've been on for so long and put so many hours in your videos. Like if you check out your videos, they're so professional, so well done. Like I'm sure like you've put your blood, sweat, and tear into every single YouTube video. And then you come on to TikTok, and obviously, as you mentioned, you're working very hard on TikTok as well. But you've been on TikTok for far less than you have been on YouTube time wise, and now all of a sudden you have significantly more followers on TikTok than you do YouTube subscribers, which is just crazy to think about.
It is. What's even crazier is like, I remember the first day that I got on it, and I remember thinking to myself, okay, well, let's see who's on this in the science world. And so I just started going through and I Googled, I searched in the actual like bar for every single big YouTuber, their name, their username, their actual name, and no one was on TikTok. Literally no one. There wasn't a single science-based, information-based person on TikTok. And I thought,
Wow.
oh my God, this is my golden moment. Like,
Yeah, there you get like I'm sure music like started playing in real life when you saw that.
yeah, the angels started with the trumpets, and I thought, man, I'm gonna go for it. I'm just gonna, even if I spend, a couple $1,000s worth of personnel and time, energy, and effort in redoing some of these experiments, it's gonna be worth it. In kind of like in a really good time frame too. We were doing stuff with David Dobrik, who's just like a social media behemoth, and
Yeah.
so like that definitely factored into moving the needle. But we found like working with David, doing these posts, like fast tracked us. I mean, the growth was phenomenal. Off of one video that had 264 million views, we went from 3 million to 6 million. So we gained 3 million followers off of one
Oh my
video.
God. Is that the elephant toothpaste one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is an incredible name in itself. Real quick, what is elephant toothpaste? Like what's the chemicals that are in that? And I know that sounds very proper when I say what's the chemicals, but
No, it's we get the question a lot actually. So there is no toothpaste involved, just an FYI.
there are no elephants either.
Yeah. Elephant toothpaste is the raw ingredients are 35% hydrogen peroxide. And then what you end up doing is you put soap, like a concentrated dish soap, in that hydrogen peroxide, and you mix with it a catalyst. In our case, we use potassium iodide. You could use yeast or sodium iodide. They work the same way. And what they do is they strip one of the oxygens off of the hydrogen peroxide, and they create O2 gas, because oxygen by itself doesn't exist naturally. It basically combines with another oxygen very quickly because of the valence electrons. The chemistry of it, basically, it does bind very quickly to create O2, which is oxygen gas, and that happens on a molecular level. And what happens is that oxygen gas gets caught in the soap that's in that mixture, and it begins to form a bubble. But that bubble expands rapidly as the other O2 molecules join the bubble, and it creates what appears like foam out of nothing, out of thin air.
Elephant toothpaste.
Elephant toothpaste. And when you do a lot of it in a very small container, the pressure builds so quickly that it ends up like shooting and like ballooning in what looks like this explosion of foam, like in a lateral and vertical manner. And then there's like steam that comes up over the mound of foam, because it's an exothermic reaction. So it's releasing, basically what it's releasing is just water vapor. And so it is a very impressive reaction.
It is, and I think it's one thing when you describe it, but it's like you totally have to see it yourself to really get the full gist of it. Like when you watch that, I don't want to spoil the video for anybody that hasn't seen it, so just say go check it out. I mean, it's got to be your most popular experiment that you've done there, but it is absolutely insane what happens with just the that little chemical mix up that you were talking about. Imagine you started your own podcast. You're growing your brand, sharing your expertise, maybe even your terrible puns, and meeting fascinating people. That is awesome. Now, imagine all the hours you've lost every week due to the podcast's demands. Not so awesome. I am your podcast producer. Email me at max@hippodirect.com. That's a really cool one. When you think of the other experiments that you've done, what else comes to mind is maybe your most memorable or the most surprising thing that's ever happened as far as experiments go?
Yeah, you know what's crazy, and you kind of mentioned, is like we spent so much time, energy, and effort on YouTube. I mean, like years, thousands of hours, thousands of dollars, and sometimes those videos, they're not seen as much because that space is so crowded. The YouTube space is so crowded, so saturated, that a lot of our like best moments pre TikTok actually just were never seen to the degree that they're seen on TikTok. I mean, no matter
Yeah.
what I upload on TikTok, the average view is going to be close to 1 million views. And
Oh
now
my God.
the
Same.
average view,
Just
the average.
kidding.
I was like, dude, tight. Um, the
It just naturally happened. Yeah, go ahead.
the average view duration is probably around like 20 seconds or so, depending on the clip length.
Which is a lot
Um,
for TikTok.
Yeah, but when you add up the hours watched, it is unbelievable. Like that one video that has 264 million views is like in the days, like days worth of watch time. Like, because they start breaking it down by hours, and then you just start to get to days, and it's
Right.
like
They're
I
making
forget
up
what
new
it
metrics for you.
is. Yeah, years worth of watch time. And so one of the things that I remember distinctly that was so neat and so cool, and I just wish TikTok was even around for this because we weren't shooting vertical video, is that we saw this. And by we, it was me and my best friend Mike, who we were roommates in New York City, who's now a producer of the Today Show. Him and I randomly one day were like, "Hey, dude, we want an adventure. Let's just do just the craziest adventure we could possibly think of." And so I was like, "Dude, I have this idea." And Mike's like, "Dude, I'm down for it. I don't even care what it is. Let's just do it." And I said, "There is a volcano in East Java, Indonesia, that is a little bit on the other side of the world. And at midnight, roughly speaking, it spews pure liquid sulfur, and that liquid sulfur catches on fire and it creates fumes that are toxic and will kill you. But the flame and the molten sulfur itself burns this really vibrant blue at night, and it looks like the volcano is erupting blue lava. And we were both sold, and so we booked a ticket to Jakarta, and we flew from Los Angeles and him New York City to Japan, then eventually to Jakarta, and then Jakarta to Bali, and then Bali by bus, and then by ferry, and then eventually by foot up this volcano.
So that's all it took to get there.
Yeah. And then you hike in at midnight so you can see it, so you have enough darkness. And a guide takes you down into this crater, which is also, like, if it didn't sound dangerous enough, it's also the world's largest acidic lake that just so happens to be next to the largest sulfur, flame naturally occurring. And so you see this thing at midnight, and it's shooting 20-foot blue flames. And then below it is what appears to be this like oozing out blue lava that's dripping down the flames all the way to this acidic lake. And the experience was like, it was something that when we left and when we did it and we were there, and then we kind of were like back on the airplane, we were like, dude, did we really just do that? Like, did that actually just happen? I mean, it was such a departure from reality. And it was such like a mish that when we finally made the YouTube video out of it, I think it got like 100,000 views or whatever, like over the course of time. But
which, by the way, is like nothing to scoff at. You're just so used to the insane numbers on TikTok you're getting now.
Yeah, or like
But I mean, for like so many people, 100,000, like that's insane. That's like a lifetime.
Yeah, but like that particular video, I like will always be burned in my brain, like by how insane it really was, and how yeah, we'd have to. In fact, you can't even go back now. They actually closed that whole thing. Like, it's too dangerous now. There was an earthquake, and somebody got super injured, and like they breathed in the fumes, and so you can't even do it anymore. And so yeah, that particular quest was something that we captured specifically for YouTube that we'll never see on TikTok.
Yeah, that's proof that, I mean, you will go the extra mile, and in this case, the extra around the world to get there and produce this amazing content. I'm curious, you are somebody who has achieved a ton of success in the social media world, as far as gaining followers and having stuff go, quote unquote viral, and giving you career opportunities that way as well. From your perspective, what do you think it is that makes your videos so fascinating and so enjoyable for so many people?
So this is gonna sound so like when I say it, it's like every moment in a movie where the audience goes, "Well, pff, duh!" Like, we all knew
That's
that.
the name of the movie. No.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I forget who told me this, but it made so much sense because when I said it out loud, I was like, like, it's so basically fundamentally like, no crap, duh. But I'll just sum it up, and it's just a one-liner. And this really applies for TikTok, but then I'll kind of go more into like YouTube, because YouTube's a little bit more of a dynamic game just because it's been around a lot longer. But for TikTok, the absolute fastest way to success, and again, like pushing aside all this like algorithm, you gotta hashtag FYP, and it's got to be at 7 o'clock exactly, and the video's got to no, not like all that crap. Like, no, it can be the shoddiest video, it can be horrible, it can be horribly filmed, it can be hashtag incorrectly, everything, as long as you are providing something that is a visual, that the audience is seeing something and experiencing something that they have never experienced or seen before. It is as simple as creating something that no one else has ever seen before. And I know that sounds crazy, and you're like, well, duh, dude. Duh.
No, I really like that, though. That's an incredible way to dumb it down. Well, in your case, smart it down. But that's a really good way to put it, because you hear so often of everybody, and I try to do this as much as possible. is be different. I'm trying to be different as possible from any other podcast, especially any other business podcast. And
Right.
so many creators out there are like, anything you can do to stand out or zig when everyone else is zagging can bode well for you. You kind of just put it that way to the extreme of try to create something that is not even on the platform or that nobody's even conceived of before. That's amazing.
Yes. Yes, because the more things that you can introduce to a platform, you got to think too, like TikTok, for example. And the reason I love TikTok for many reasons, but it's a new generation. So, like, majority Generation Z, you got to think, man, like, wow, a lot of these people have not seen the same things that millennials or Gen X has seen, who have experienced TV, reality TV transition over to YouTube. So, like, you could really, literally reintroduce things to this platform that may have been like super crazy viral on YouTube, but just are not available or have not been seen on TikTok. And so a lot of times I will search through the app and just see, okay, like what hasn't been done? Where have we not seen that before? Okay, well, I'll be the first one to introduce it and I'll put that video out there and it'll get 1 million views, like, or more. Like a
Wow.
perfect example is like our second to last video is this thing that I renamed the anti-greedy goblet. And it's this thing within the glass blowing world that like people have seen for like hundreds of years. I mean, this thing has been out forever. And it's basically a goblet that has a tube in it. And what happens is if you fill the water line too high beyond the loop of the tube, it basically overfills and it creates essentially a siphon. And then the siphon creates a vacuum, and the vacuum sucks out all the water in the cup. And it kind of like distributes it down below where the neck is of the cup. And like literally, again, like people have been glass blowing for hundreds of years, at least documented, maybe thousands, maybe not glass blowing, but the art of glass. And so this thing's been around forever, but we were the first ones to ever put it on TikTok. And so for that reason, it got 4 million views because again, like no one had ever seen it. It's like magic, it's like mind blowing that this thing exists or does what it does.
And that's a cool one as well. Everything you put out there just looks really, really cool. So I think another way to look at it is just, wow, he produces cool shit.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
will say in my defense that well, not defense, but in the defense of the app,
You could
too.
defend, sure.
I'm gonna defend myself too. Is that there does become this? There is a time frame where you become so big on a platform that you do have posting advantage. Meaning, someone else may have posted that glass cup somewhere on the platform before I. However, their channel is so small, and that their barrier for entry to go viral is so small, and that their reach is so small that they now will have a harder time of actually reaching sort of that precipice for something to go viral, for them to gain followers. And so, but again, that is the advantage of being an early adopter. You
Right.
get in and you lay the framework before no one else can. You literally suck up all the real estate. No one else can build anywhere.
Yeah. And I think it's multiplied the more kind of unique or obscure the category is. Like as you were saying, TikTok and previously as it was musically, everybody was thinking music and lip syncing there. So something like science is like what? No, I think most people in the science world or doctors or chemists would be like, oh well, this clearly isn't for me. We even had a previous guest on, Dr. Durgam, who was featured in Gary V's book Crushing It, and she got in early on musically and now TikTok as well. And she's used it as a way to market her dental practice to the point that, her kids' friends and a bunch of kids are like, I want to go to her. She's the cool dentist. So it takes people like you and her that are thinking outside the box to really, really make an impact on these platforms.
Yeah, there's a guy named the Dentist as well, and I met him down at TikTok or at Playlist, and very similar story. And yeah, I mean, he makes like so much of his money now is coming from referrals from TikTok, which I find
Wow.
just awesome. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like really milking it and taking it
It's a
to the next
business tool.
level.
Yeah. It's a marketing tool for them.
Oh, so what I was going to say, just to sum it up, for YouTube though, it is a bit of a different ballgame, and the reason that YouTube is a bit of a different ballgame is because you can be super unique and you can put something out there, but because YouTube has so much content and there's so many things out there, it's the analogy is like going to a thrift shop. It's like there is good stuff there, but you just don't know where it is. And so if you were to put a Dolce and Gabbana suit somewhere in the thrift shop, that's awesome. There's value there, but where the hell is it? And so like
Yeah.
that's the problem for YouTube, is that market is so saturated that there's not a lot of room for new budding success like there could be on TikTok.
And that's a hell of an analogy. Shout out D&G. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get into the mind of Nickipedia, the Mindopedia. And this is a segment on inspiration and creativity. So how you stay creative and inspired. So there's a couple. I mean, you're obviously a very, very creative person, and the videos you put out are some of the most creative out there. So kind of the first arm of creativity here, and I'm going to trademark that word phrase there, is how do you come up with the ideas for your videos?
Man, that is a great question. And the answer is actually really, I mean, it's like everyone has sort of a different path for creativity, so on and so forth. What we have found that to be the best way to come up with something that's creative and then really sort of like follow it through is that usually it meets a couple criterias. One, does it fit within my realm of content? Like, you know, I have a lot of really cool, fun ideas and stuff that I want to do. Like I really want to explore real estate and flipping houses and how you put up drywall and sheetrock. That's probably just not a good video for my science channel. I mean, we could probably find a way to do it, but it would be a stretch. And so we want to make sure that the concepts and ideas are living within the realm of that universe. Another thing that happens a lot of the time is, and it's just something that I do religiously because it is impossible to force creativity. You can't like sit in a room and be like, all right, dude, I'm going to come up with the best 10 ideas right here, right now. I keep on my phone a little like area in the notes section because I have an iPhone. And so on the iPhone, there's this, it says notes. It's like the
Yeah,
yellow,
yeah. Shout out the
yellow
Notes
pad.
app if it's considered
Yeah,
an app.
exactly.
I'm big
Yeah.
on that as well. Yeah.
I don't think you can delete it. But
That's why I'm big on it.
exactly. I just titled things in there. So one of them is called YT YouTube, TT TikTok, and IGID ideas. And so I jot down the concepts as they hit me, even if they're not fleshed out at all whatsoever. Just like um, you know, this would be a super great idea, and I don't know where it will go, but it would be super cool to do that. And so I'll throw them down in there. And then what'll typically happen is that we'll be getting to the end of a production cycle, meaning like we have 4 or 5 videos out that were either branded content pieces or really good topical and timing, and we kind of nailed them all. And then I'll just go and I'll start sifting through these ideas that I came up with months ago, and I'll find, oh, hey, look, oh, that's a good one. How could I sort of like work that one back out? And then we'll just develop it. And the idea too, which is like, you got to be really specific about development. Da, 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 da. The cool thing about TikTok and YouTube is that the only thing that you're out by doing some of these ideas, unless the chemicals cost a lot of money or you're engineering something, is the fact that it's your time to do it. So it's like no harm, no foul. It's not like you created a video and you imploded your YouTube channel. The algorithm actually works for you. So it says, hey, look, your followers weren't into this, so we stopped shopping it around to them so they didn't unsubscribe from you. And that's basically why some videos get views and others don't. And if it, for whatever reason, was a success in that particular day, then all the viewers wanted to see it and they liked it, then the algorithm will continue to shop it around and your following will go up. And so in a way, like I feel like the platforms are really, really, really easy on creators because it kind of lets you just do whatever you want, and then the algorithm protects you from destroying what you've built.
Holy cow. You're clearly in the weeds of knowing how the algorithm works as well. And so I'm glad the Notes app is getting a lot of use. I find I do use that as well, just because it's literally in the palm of your hand. It's so easy when you think of something just to jot it down there and come back later.
This is something I've done ever since I've been in college too. And this is scientific. This is actually scientifically proven that there are certain times of days and there are certain areas that your brain becomes more creative. And people say this all the time: when you're in the shower, you're more creative, so on and so forth. And a lot of studies have shown that you're creative when your body, your physicality is relaxed, and your subconscious can begin to take over. And that usually happens when you're driving, you're doing something, you're comfortable, and you're focused on, obviously driving, but your subconscious is running really, really quickly, or you're just about to fall asleep. It's another really great time to write down all your awesome
Ooh,
ideas. Make
yeah.
sure to don't be lazy and get out of bed. Some of the best ideas, I've always said, well, I'll write that down in the morning, and you totally forget. And so jump out of bed, scroll that thing down, doesn't matter. It's worth not getting that extra 5 seconds of sleep. Yeah, when you pop out of the shower, write it down. And so that's a science-based answer for when you're most likely to come up with your creative ideas.
I love it. There we have it. That's really cool. I mean, you hear shower thoughts, so I guess these are shower thoughts, driving thoughts, almost falling asleep thoughts, and it is so true. And I think it's so important to be cognizant in that moment of, hey, I really need to write this down, or I need to record this somehow, because you will forget it after a full night's sleep. I've heard stories of musicians, classic rock guitarists. I forget who it was specifically, but there'd be guitarists that are about to go to bed, and they just have this riff in their head, and they get out of bed in that moment and play that riff on their guitar and record it. So they have it right then and there, because you don't want to lose that. And some of those have turned out to be mega hits. The same thing applies for creative ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, just like scientifically speaking, like when your eyes are open and you're going about your normal day, you have so much data coming in from the outside world that your brain has to process. It's not doing a really great job trying to also be creative at the same time. And so it's like you're an animal trying to stay alive. And so it's like processing like danger, not danger, I'm hungry, water, sun, light, like
Right,
all
like fight
these.
or flight and the
Yeah.
basics.
And so it's just not a great time to be thinking about cool TikTok ideas. When you're in your comfortable bed, it's quiet, it's dark, you're comfy. That's a great time for your mind to sort of like create something that's not there yet.
Yeah. On the science side, so obviously you have a science education and interest in parts of this, in many parts of the science world, as you got older. How do you stay so sharp on how things work from a chemical standpoint, and how this is like, how do you know that these experiments that you do, how do you know, or at least have a good feeling that these are actually going to work, as opposed to just being dud after dud after dud?
Yeah, awesome question, man. Because in the beginning, when I was doing my content that was more explanatory content, we were actually working out of the YouTube space LA, and we were doing green screen content. So like doing explainer type videos, why is the grass green? Why is the sky blue? That kind of stuff.
A color based question.
Yeah, basically. I always thought, based off of my like me consuming content on YouTube, that these people were just geniuses. Every single one of them was a genius. They must already know this information, and that's why they're so good at what they do. Well, after 6 years of producing content, I realized that that is a total myth. Basically, it's actually a reverse engineer type problem. You come up with a concept that you think is going to be awesome, and then you reverse engineer, like you learn actually how that process works, and then how to modify it in order to fit your creative. Never have I come into a creative going, oh, I know how this works, and then we're going to change it to be like this. It usually starts with, man, that would be awesome if this could happen. Okay, how in the hell do you make that happen? And then you start to dive a little deeper. Oh, well, we could do this, we could do that. All right, well, this might not quite fit, but like now I understand the mechanical process. And bits and pieces of that discovery end up in the video. And so what you end up seeing in the actual final product is almost like how I learned about that particular demo. And then I'm telling you in the video, well, shit, this is actually how it works, because I just learned about it a week ago. And so that's what you end up seeing in the video, is sort of the excitement and the energy of me wanting to tell you how this thing works and how we got it to work.
And then you come off as a genius. So that's all your master plan.
I mean, basically, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's how it works.
I will say though, like having I will say this, like understanding to be able to how to like read science. Like as a biology background and being so deep into that field, when I read science-based literature, I understand what they're saying. And so there's a huge advantage in that category. Like I understand what those words are referring to and what they mean, and the prefixes and the suffixes. And so for that reason, it doesn't, it doesn't appear to be Chinese to me. I understand what it is. And so, I mean, there's an advantage there for sure. But again, it's all relearning. I mean, you really got to figure it out. Like again, like a total entrepreneur, you gotta rework it and figure it out.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes you might just challenge yourself and read it all in Mandarin as well. So that's just impressive in itself. So let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. I know that's the best thing you've ever heard. Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. This is where we talk about a recent campaign or strategy or tactic that caught our attention. And earlier you mentioned your buddy David Dobrik, who, for anybody that's familiar, he's got I think the latest I checked, he was over 16 million YouTube subscribers. He's massive. He's a legend in the space. Anyway, something he has experimented with his following or that is come up in the conversation of how people gain their following that caught your attention. You mind talking about the giveaways and things in that space?
Yeah, so this is something that caught my eye because it's something that I've wanted to do for a really long time. And so I was always very skeptical of it. So I really sort of leaned into how this thing actually works. And for the longest time, I used to think, oh man, giveaways are just like a cheap way to like get people to do something. But then the more that I started thinking about it, the more that I started realizing, yeah, but like, isn't every way in social media a cheap way to get people to follow you? Like, you tease them for the next video. You tell them like, follow for no good reason, subscribe because you should, whatever. I mean,
Yeah,
at least
bring them to volcanoes in Indonesia with you.
exactly. At least in giveaways, the audience actually has a chance to like receive something. So I saw this post from David Dobrik that he was telling people to like this brand's page. So he was giving away a Tesla, and he said, in order to qualify for this giveaway, you need to do these three things. You need to like this brand's Instagram page. You need to comment on this post. And again, all of this actually makes sense now that he says it, because I realize it's all algorithmic based. So like comments feed into how engaging your post is. People are watching to the end of a giveaway to get the full information. You know what I mean? They want to know, like, how do I actually get the thing you're giving away? And then they follow the instructions because it's a really easy lift to follow an account, write something on your phone that's already in your hand for the potential upside of a $30,000 car. And so I'm like, that's actually a pretty good idea when you consider that some brands would spend a lot more money than that in order just to get, let's say, a couple 100,000 views on a video, when they could
Right,
get
exactly.
a couple 100,000 followers or 1 million followers. Now, I don't know what they paid David. Obviously, I'm sure that was hefty too. But when you're looking at the numbers versus the spend versus what you're getting in return, it's a pretty high output for something like that. And so that's something that we're going to start experimenting with. And I was totally motivated by seeing the success of gearing following by doing giveaways.
It's interesting when you dive into it like that, because I think my first impression and a lot of people's first impression when you do a giveaway like that is, oh, this is just kind of like a spammy tactic to gain more traction. But the way these algorithms work and the way you look at it from a marketing or branding side and get sponsors involved, that's an incredible opportunity there. And obviously becomes, the ceiling keeps getting higher and higher when it's somebody like you or David who has amassed such a giant following there.
Yeah, it is really cool to sort of like look past the like, oh, it's a gimmick, and like look more into the statistical conversions of something like that, and how an ad spend like that is way better than actually doing like an ad buy like how you would do on Facebook. It's like impressions versus conversions versus how much you would spend to literally get people to follow you. I mean, it's awesome actually. It's definitely worth looking into.
So only a little bit of time left here, and usually wrap up with some of my favorite segments. One called The Unusual, one called Rapid Fire Q&A. You would never be able to guess what that is. But for you, I want to do a bit of a mix, a unique mix here. So I'm going to combine them into one segment, and this is going to be a little challenge for you. This is called unusual science fun facts. So
Sweet.
for this case, so I don't know how many of these you have off the top of your head, but for this case, it's not really me asking questions. However, I think it would be awesome for you to share just some random and unusual science fun facts you have, and one to kind of get your brain thinking, and one that I heard as I was preparing for this interview from you is that when you eat a Jolly Rancher, you're actually eating glass. So that's kind of was a cool thing I thought about is I've eaten glass several times in my life before, so thank you for that one. But what other fun facts do you have in the science world, kind of bite-sized information like that?
Oh man, that is a great question. Man, you know what? I'm gonna have to think. I'm gonna have to ponder on this. But really quick to answer or to riff off of your Jolly Rancher one, that is accurate because what makes a glass versus a solid is a crystalline structure. And it just so happens that Jolly Ranchers are considered sugar glass. So like there's no crystalline structure within the sugar, so like there's a bunch of different molecules that are in no particular shape throughout a Jolly Rancher, which is why it's considered glass. And so we call glass glass because it's like it has a silica base to it, or that's like the main ingredient or chemical, or not even chemical, but molecule in it. But that's only just because we're used to calling it glass. But technically, glass can be made of any different type of molecule that fits within that realm of not having a crystalline structure.
All right.
Okay. Okay. So when people refer to onion breath and garlic breath, what they don't realize is that when you bite down on a piece of garlic or a piece of onion, that when you break open the cells, a fine mist of the garlic or the onion goes actually into your lungs, and it actually sits inside of the alveoli, like the lungs, like this little sacs that basically do like the oxygen blood exchange. And so when people say like, oh my gosh, you have onion or garlic breath, eat this mint, the mint goes to your stomach, but the odor is actually in your lungs. And so there's no way of actually getting onion or garlic breath out, or like to totally get rid of it.
Really?
You can only mask the smell by something that's in your mouth, but you're not really getting rid of the smell itself.
Oh wow, it's so much deeper than what's in your mouth.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy.
That's amazing.
So one thing that I think that find really interesting is that most people believe that water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit because we've always been told that as kids. Like water freezes, at well, why is it called freezing? It's called freezing because that's the temperature at which water freezes. But that is actually not quite true. Water undisturbed or without what are called nucleation sites will actually go much further down the scale. I believe you can get water somewhere close to like negative 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It's something absurd like that before it actually crystallizes. And the reason is because in order for water to actually turn into ice, it needs some type of thing for the crystallization to form around. And so in the absence of any of those items, whether that be another crystal of ice or like a piece of dust or anything, the liquid will become super cooled and it'll stay as a liquid, even though it's far under 32 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh wow. Yeah, I just always assumed 32, like frozen. That's it. I had no
Yeah.
idea there's the whole underworld there.
Yeah, this is one more too that I just thought of while we're talking about ice. Because one of the videos that I have is called "Why is Ice Slippery?" And this is a really interesting one. So, ice for the longest time, people have been trying to figure this out. Why is ice slippery? And most people have always been taught that, like on an ice skating rink, if you apply pressure to ice, that then melts the ice, and then you are slipping on the water. That is not quite the full story. And the reason that's not quite the full story is that if you get ice colder than 32 degrees, like let's say you've already frozen it, right? You have these nucleation sites, it turns to crystal, and you get it to like negative 45 degrees. At negative 45 degrees, the ice is actually less slippery than it is when it's in the teens. And
Huh.
the reason that is is because there's actually a thin, super thin, molecular thin layer of water in that sort of sits on top of ice. But it's not really like what we consider like water, like you can kind of kind of slap it all around. It's actually the molecules going back and forth between a water molecule and an ice molecule, meaning like it's one of it's free floating, it can move around, and the other one is stuck in place in a crystalline structure. And the analogy is closer to like when you throw marbles on the floor, like how you slip across the marbles. That is actually more the case with ice than it being slippery because there's water on top. You're actually slipping on the molecules of water over on top of the molecules of ice.
This is just proving that everything you believe is not actually quite what you think it is. There's always something else going on, especially at the molecular level there. So I appreciate it's really cool that you dive into and learn why these things happen or what's actually happening there. And I did lie to you. I have one rapid fire question for you, which is really not rapid fire, but I've just been wondering about this. What is your dream experiment? Like if there's one thing that you haven't done yet that you think would be like the biggest and best thing. I know you're so big on let's do it bigger or let's go bigger. What is something that you would really, really like to do that's kind of like a big scale experiment thing that you haven't done yet?
Wow, man, that's a really good question. Some of those actually it's interesting because some of those are actually already in the pipeline that we've already
Ooh.
thought of
All
that were
right,
like,
cool. All right. Well, good luck with them.
yeah, we're already doing some of them. Because of our current COVID sort of crisis, some of those things have been put on hold just
Of
because
course.
they require such a group effort. But yeah, there was one concept that we've been really excited about, and that it's a collaboration, which we don't know exactly how we're going to do it, but we think this would be really interesting, really fun. And that is working with the guys down in Australia. That it's the YouTube channel How Ridiculous, and they basically like throw stuff off of like a tower. And we thought it would be so cool to figure out how you could get a giant bouncy ball to be in the same like shape of as a bouncy ball, but like a real bouncy ball to throw off of this tower because we were curious if it would bounce or if it would break. And so we would
Ah.
love to have the manufacturing process to create like a really like an actual solid bouncy ball that's like the size of like one of those like Bosu balls and throw it off of essentially like this like skyscraper.
Oh my God. Yeah, that sounds like a really fun one. All right. Well, hopefully, I mean, who knows? Maybe by the time you're listening to this, that will already have happened and we'll know the answer. But at the time of recording, that sounds like a really fun project. So wishing you the best with that. But Nick, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for sharing everything about your life, your pretty ordinary life, I would say, not too much excitement going on there. But all the amazing things that you've done and kind of the creative process behind the fantastic videos that you put out. Before we go, where's the best place for people to connect with you and follow you and see all your stuff?
TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, across the board, it's all Nick Uhas, Nickuhas.
Perfect. And then last thing here, final thoughts. It could be a weird science fun fact. No, I'm just kidding. It could be whatever you want. It could be a quote or a line, whatever you want. Send us off here.
Man, I just want to tell people that if they can think it, then they can do it. And it sounds really cheesy, but it is the absolute truth. I would have never thought in a million years that coming out of Hilliard, Ohio, I would have achieved half the crap that I did. Yeah, if you can think it, you can do it.
And if you build it, they will come. Thanks, Nick.
Exactly.
I know what you're thinking, and yes, I did think of that line all by myself. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nick, for sharing all the cool and creative and just spectacular things you're up to. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning into another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Good Pods, where you can find all the podcasts your friends and family are listening to. You can also dive into our marketing and business growth resources at hippodirect.com/blog and hippodirect.com/newsletter. That newsletter is the Hippo Digest, and it's your place for wild marketing ideas every single week. And of course, come say hey on your favorite social media channels at the handles Hippo Direct and Max Branstetter. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!